Been an interesting 48 hours, boys. Welcome in, everybody. Appreciate you on Warchant TV. You see the owner, founder, administrator, Gene Williams. You see director of digital content there. That's my guy, my producer, Tom Lang. I'm Jeff Cameron, wildly popular talk show host. All right, so here we go. Our titles are out of the way. Let's get to the meat on the bone. Gene, were you shocked when, and let me put my glasses on and make sure I don't misquote him, Florida State President Rick McCullough said, "My current assessment of the situation, after very deep analysis, is that I believe FSU will have to consider leaving the ACC unless there were a radical change to the revenue distribution." Were you shocked to hear it?
No. It raised a little bit of an eyebrow to hear strong words coming from the FSU president. I thought I could see Peter Collins, I could see A.D. Alford making a comment like that. So that's coming strong when the president of a university kind of lays down the gauntlet. A little political, some of the stuff he said, but he left no bones about it. And anybody that saw the Board of Trustees meeting and heard every Board of Trustees member come out and say what they did. I mean, you've come out and effectively said, the divorce is on. It's just we got to work out the details, how the exit's going to happen. Obviously, these guys have worked for the last, they said, 12 months, I think, trying to figure out a way to get this behind closed doors, working with the ACC, working with ESPN, working with whoever to try to come up with a viable solution. And pretty much we heard there was none. Nothing's happening. Even the potential for some uneven revenue distribution is not viable. So it's just, again, I think Drew Weatherford said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how and when Florida State leaves the ACC. So now we just have the wait. And I know one Board of Trustees member, and I forgot who it was, threw out that August 15th date as the deadline to notify the conference of the departure. And you guys can talk to this too. I don't think we're going to hear something by August 15th. Unfortunately, I think we heard a 12-month exit plan that they might be working on. So I think that's what we're going to be under. And that gives them time to negotiate with the other conferences. It gives them time to work out that grant of rights that apparently they've got a good firm handle on how they're going to deal with that, how they're going to negotiate and do all that stuff. So I think it's going to be 12 months, but I mean, it's been thrown down. Florida State is out of the ACC. Just a matter of when.
Tom, it's always been this way. We go back to the last time we talked about the video, the first Board of Trustees meeting that really made waves, the YouTube feed that everybody saw. And, you know, it was at that moment, Peter Collins, Michael Alford were saying what was kind of unsaid before, but they were doing so publicly, that this was it. It was untenable. This was not something that they could sit idly by and watch happen and seek to compete. Now they're saying it every day. This feels like lead-up marketing. If you think about the last 48 hours, there's a story with numbers that's leaked to a Big 12 outlet. All of a sudden, people are quoting that or co-opting that. And the next thing you know, there's folks on the internet all talking about this. The next thing you know, we're on Warchant TV. You and I were doing a great job of talking to Peter Collins last night. He's the head of the Board of Trustees, and now he's saying it publicly. And then today, the president does. This is a buildup, an intense buildup, and a conversation, a means by which to create a critical mass. To what end? Do they do what Gene just referenced, that August the 15th they're announcing this? Or is just this to build up to, hey, guys, it's official. We're done here. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, to me, this is, once again, like the previous meeting that made headlines, this is like an intricate dance or a ballet or a wrestling match, if you will, in terms of, you know, the choreography that's going on here. I don't think there's any accident. There's no accident that they have in-house stuff that they've got to appropriate first that is snooze fest worthy for the first 30 minutes or so of the meeting, and then the president speaks later. I think, you know, Chair Collins said during the meeting that we don't typically do this, but we wanted to say, yeah, there's a reason, because you had to get the regular business done first before the media firestorm that comes with the statements that they were all going to make. So again, I think this was choreographed in terms of they knew where they were going to go. And there wasn't a whole kind of discovery period of time in which there were trustees who had questions and said, wait a minute. So if we're going to do this, well, what about that? It sounded like opinions were fully vetted and fully formed on the issue as they went one by one. It almost felt like a House of Representatives or Senate panel in which everybody's got to say their piece and say the same thing over and over again, just so they're personally on the record reiterating that they want Florida State to move out of the ACC because the gap is too big. So that's a long way of saying that this felt like they had a discussion before there was the discussion. The one thing I'll say about this year versus next and setting expectations, Peter Collins did drop twice in the meeting that we'll get back to you sooner than later. And it's very difficult to run a company if the company had to have an open forum like this in which the public can view it. So they're definitely holding back something. And Peter Collins did allude to, perhaps this is more poker playing, perhaps not, that they would get back to the trustees, that A.D. Alford would get back to the trustees sooner than later. What that means is anybody's guess, but I'm not going to throw before this August 15th off the table because I didn't think they were going to be that aggressive today, frankly.
Gene, is the effort here to create as much public acrimony as possible to get people, whether it be a network or a league or other leagues, talking about the possibility, coming to the table to negotiate some sort of deal in order to stay out of court?
Yeah, I don't know about the court thing. I absolutely, there's something planned here. I mean, they wouldn't go public, and this kind of like Tom said, this whole thing was like a strong, unified effort to say what they did in that. So obviously, they're trying to shake the tree a little bit, and I think part of that obviously is to get the attention of the network. Obviously, ingratiate yourself to the fans, because if there was ever a issue FSU fans have all come together on, it's they want the hell out of the ACC. So I mean, they've jumped in on that. Legally, this is where it's going to get interesting to me, and we'll have to talk to our sources. But the next few days, the next 12 months, if this thing plays out, what's going to go on legally in this stuff? Because I mean, there is going to be something going on legally here, whether you like it or not, with the grant of rights, with the exit fee, all that stuff. It's not like Florida State's going to pay all that money. And there's got to be, look, there's been rumors float around about fraud and the initial thing. I don't know, like, honestly, in my opinion, I don't know that's going to fly 10 years after the fact. You're going to try to prove fraud on something like this. And, but that doesn't mean there aren't legal challenges to the grant of rights. And I know they've had members from FSU up there in Charlotte looking through contracts, going through a fine tooth comb to the point they go in there. And Ira told us this because we talked about it on a show recently. They can't even bring phones in to take pictures of those things. That's very confidential information. But trust me, they've gone through a fine tooth comb, every clause, everything in the world. And one thing I know about when I practice on dealing with lawyers, they can find an argument somewhere. There's something they're going to do. And even being able to have that argument that you could put out there in fearful, ESPN and all them, and they're not going to want a legal battle with FSU, especially when Mickey Mouse is in the backyard here as well. I mean, they don't want to be involved in that stuff, especially if the state of Florida gets behind Florida State in a suit like that. So, I mean, I think it's in everybody's best interest to negotiate that. So if you you guys have talked about it, you cut that fee in half, you get the Big Ten to chip in some, you get a schedule where you're paying out a little bit of money per year. It becomes suddenly, when you're making $30 to $40 million more, in a few years, you're back to where you need to be. And that's better than waiting 13 years. So I do see an avenue where this could play. And that's maybe where whether it's the next 2 weeks or the next 12 months, I think that's one of the big things that needs to be worked out on right now.
Clearly, they want everybody on record. They want it to be known that they want out. They want it to be known that soon they will be announcing that they're leaving. What that does do, though, is create the expectation amongst the fans and the boosters and the alumni that something is immediate. Do we think by immediate, we're talking about 2025, 2026? When is it that we think Florida State, wherever it is they end up, will be playing somewhere other than the ACC?
That's a tough question. It's impossible to know. I think that there's a decent shot that they let it be known by August 15th. But what the trigger date would be, I mean, look, if you're going to talk this tough on the Board of Trustees meeting, and everybody wants to make sure that they say that this is a deficit that we cannot make up, 30 million, 35 million, 29, whatever number you want to throw at it, I would think that the urgency would be there to start a new conference as soon as possible. Like, why would you talk that tough and then not follow through by saying, well, we'll join in 2025. We want a little runway before we make the transition. Like, that does not make sense with the rhetoric that you want to throw around, in that every day we're losing money to our competitors to the south, to the north, in the footprint of the southeast. We can't compete, especially with NIL, because the gap is going to grow too great. So it sounds to me, at least the way the Board of Trustees is talking, that they would want it sooner than later. I don't know that that's feasible legally or in terms of the logistics that would be necessary. But if they're going to talk that way during the meeting, I would think that sooner than later is probably the priority. Yeah.
Well, I think they want that, Tom. But the biggest difference between the likes of, say, a Colorado that somebody mentioned on the board, or anybody else as we watch the Pac-12 dissolve, is that those programs are not is, set back by the albatross of a grant of rights deal. I mean,
I know.
those programs are free to go because they don't have a contract holding them back from leaving anytime soon, especially not if a conference, if a conference dissolves. Florida State can want to leave. We can jump up and down. We can rattle the cages. We can tell the world we're open for business. We can say it's time to leave. This is not going to work. And if somebody doesn't come calling or come to the table, that's somebody being ESPN. Gene, certainly you could talk about maybe Fox trying to get into the backyard of ESPN and snatch some assets like Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State. That's all good for Florida State's efforts to leave. But if it doesn't happen, I think my point is it's contingent on others. It's not just that we want to leave.
Right. And Tom, to your point too, if they get that, I think they've all said, look, every year you wait, you're getting further, you're digging that hole deeper and deeper that you got to climb out of.
Yeah.
It really behooves them to look at that August 15th date. Look, I think it's a little bit of a long shot. It seems like the fact they threw out a 12-month exit plan in my mind thinks they've kind of said, look, we got 12 months to work this out. But you're right. I mean, that would be, it's not inconceivable that they announce that exit, because then that cuts that, if it's a year, geez, you could be out as soon as maybe a year from now. But I think if I had to just throw a guess, I'd say, probably 2025, maybe you're playing in a new conference. And to Jeff's point, and you notice how they've tried to market this thing over and over, Florida State, the ratings, the eyeballs, everything else. And how big is the next other thing they're looking at the next 12 months, guys? How much more marketable is Florida State going to be
if they win
they
and
have the
big
kind of season we think they're going to have? They win the conference, they beat LSU, maybe they even make the playoffs. Their marketability goes even higher at that point. So maybe this is a plan to say, our biggest goal now is to make this program as marketable as it can to if you want Big Ten and SEC, you want them competing against each other, obviously for Florida State's rights. And especially, and I think it goes back to, is there a little bit of a magic bullet to get out of the grant of rights? If there really is, then I think that seriously opens things up for Florida State, because then the Big Ten, if there's not big hurdles for them to come in, I'm convinced, absolutely, they would love to get Florida State and Clemson and maybe a couple other teams down here to make themselves a national, especially there's talk today about how now Oregon and Washington are back in the fold for expansion. Man, you got that West Coast, you get Midwest, and now you got the East Coast and Southeast. I mean, the SEC's got to be looking like they're getting a little surrounded right now on all corners. So I think that would behoove Fox big time. So yeah, I'm very interested to see all this, what's going to go on behind closed doors with the networks.
All of it's good for Florida State to a certain extent, because it's a blood in the water type of thing that you're describing here, that ESPN is in the middle of cuts. They have to figure out moving forward what they want to be a part of. You could dissolve the ACC and save $249 million a year, pluck the assets, bolster the SEC, of which you control the most of, and then you could keep Fox at bay. But if you don't do that and you remain status quo, just for pennies on the dollar that you're making off the ACC, and Fox decides to come in, and then all of a sudden you've let the devil in your backyard. It gets very interesting, but all of this is what Florida State wants. I would argue, once again, lead up marketing. Go back a year. Go back to when we started hearing the rumblings. Follow the steps from there. Florida State, and this is not a knock on Florida State, this is in their best interest. Florida State has engineered all of this. They're making as much noise as possible. They follow it up with leaked stories about ratings and all the things you just alluded to. Now they're talking tougher and tougher, and now they're saying more and more on a regular basis, to the point where last night Peter Collins said to Ira on Warchant TV and Tom that we see the opportunities within the grant of rights.
Yeah.
We went from it is ironclad to we see opportunities. That's amazing. But I do believe this has been a marketing push for a year, for lack of a better term.
I agree wholeheartedly. And again, if you take Peter Collins at his word, it's that the grant of rights won't be the document that stops Florida State from doing what it wants to do. So my question, if we're just looking at this very simply, and I know the Triangle media and maybe a large part of the national media is laughing at this conversation, but now you've got the president of the university on the record. And clearly that part of it, I think, was carefully crafted too. Mr. President, say as much as you can, and then maybe hedge a little bit and allow the board to take it from there. But why don't you bring it to the floor, and then we'll advance the conversation and move the ball closer to the goal line. But I'm just looking at this situation as, why would you do it now on August the 2nd at a Board of Trustees meeting if you didn't have intent to do something before August the 15th of this year? You only are setting yourself up to look like you were bluffing and you don't have any real cards to play. You could have done this in December and kept on doing a shadow campaign between now and the end of the football season, and then leverage something for next year. I just find the timing of it very curious that you want to force the issue and message this stuff right now on August 2nd before August 15th. They could have done it a month from now, Gene. They're talking about the meeting at LSU and Southern Miss. They could have waited. Why do it now is the general question I'd ask.
I got a thought of this too, and I'll get your opinion on this, guys. At this point, so they're done. I think we can agree they're out of the ACC. It's a matter of when. What's the downside of going ahead at this point and saying, put in your notice that you're out? I mean, you could still, during that 12 months, work on it. It's open and obvious at this point. You're done. And I think the other thing, here's the deal. And I floated out this nugget the other day in the tribal council, and I've heard from pretty high up, there's a lot of pressure on North Carolina right now because Florida State, Clemson, some of these others know when Carolina goes, and I've even heard the SEC now is really because they want to be in another state. I don't know. I think it's antiquated thinking. We don't want to be in South Carolina, Florida. We're already there. We want to be a new state, but they really want that North Carolina market, whether the Big Ten or they does. When they go, I've told it's done. The conference dissolved because then enough other teams, Carolina's gone, Florida State's gone, Clemson's gone, the conference is done. That GOR is gone. And so I think at this point, you need to get the ball rolling. So the more I think about it, I don't see the downside of just now. And to Tom's point, maybe this is to set this up. In 2 weeks, we're going to get a release. Florida State has put in its official notice to leave the ACC. That makes more and more sense to me. Because am I missing a downside of them doing that now?
I said the other day, Gene, that I thought that Florida State was willing to embrace the role of villain. Somebody has to jump ship first and take the lead. And I think Florida State is willing to do that. I also said I thought that Florida State might announce that they're leaving because you could always just say, well, we changed our minds. If things radically shifted, you can say, I changed my mind. It's not going to shift. The ACC is not going to be saved at this point. You and I know that. But my point is, you can say we intend to leave.
Sure. You can file divorce papers and then take it back.
Yeah. I mean, let's find out what happens from there. Again, generating chaos, acrimony, attention, grumbling. It's the squeaky wheel. It's James Harden deciding he doesn't want to play with whatever team he's on now, and he's going to tell the world that he's open for business. Okay, there it is. Here comes Florida State. We're James Harden. We're tired of being here. But you just got here. Hey, we want out, and I'm going to keep crying about it until we get out. But you got to do what you got to do, and I think we're getting there.
Yeah, but we win championships. We show up in championship games, and we win those. Just a little difference between us and James. Just saying.
Yeah. Show up big in the moments, right? That's the important thing that we continue to do that. You knew I'd find a way to work in a shot at James Harden's house. But it's interesting to me to see this play out so publicly. But I also think it is an act of desperation, but it's also out of necessity. It's born out of necessity. Florida State could remain quiet and work behind the scenes and feverishly try to find a way out of here and announce whenever that moment is that they think they've broken through. But they already know they're dead if they sit around and do nothing. So what the hell's the difference? If you're going to get it, if you're going to be burdened by an eventual lawsuit of some kind or tangled in the courts, it doesn't really matter. You might as well see what else is out there and see if people begin to discuss alternatives to an ugly and litigious future.
Well, I think we had a question up there, and thank you so much for that. Was that Wilson? Yeah, thanks, Wilson, for that tip and the question. My thing, too, if they do, let's say in the next 2 weeks come out, I hope they're coordinated with the Clemson, and then the next day Clemson does theirs. To me, that would be – so I don't know if Clemson would get the benefit, to your question, the benefit of holding calls in that game if both teams are on the way out. But to your point, Jeff, about playing the villain, if they do have their notice out there, some of those ACC games might be kind of interesting on the officiating side of things this season, especially you're playing, a Pitt or Wake Forest or something like that. I could see those games getting, man, that Hankey's going to get a lot of work in those games. What's that?
Can it get any worse?
I think it could. Sure. Why not? This is the ACC. There's no depth to how horrific the officiating can get.
If you're playing North Carolina and Charlotte for the title and North Carolina hasn't gone public with anything, you better brace yourself for that one, I would think.
Yeah, buckle up, everybody. You're going to have to be better than the team and the refs, right? We've said that for years and years and years. It's interesting. I do think that Florida State has taken the next big step. I think a lot of it is rattling the cage in the hopes that somebody comes to the table, whether that be the conference, ESPN, Fox, whomever, the Big Ten. I do believe, final thing here, guys, I want to ask you about this because I find this interesting as well. A lot of our fan base and the people who've talked about this in the chat or online, on Twitter, or on the message boards at warchant.com, they've all assumed that, Florida State's going to the Big Ten. Whereas I kind of look at this as trying, for lack of a better term, to bring attention to the fact that we could go to the Big Ten if there were an offer there, but we would really, in my opinion, we want to end up in the SEC, do we not?
Yeah, I mean,
your opinion
go
now,
ahead.
we want to end up in the SEC, do we not?
Oh, there's no doubt. I think if you polled 90% of the fans would say that, but I think last night Peter Collins with Tom and Ira kind of spoke about this too, and he said ultimately it's not the regional thing won't be the major factor, but you could read between the lines. It's a factor. You know, all things being equal, you'd like to be having Auburn in here and Tennessee and even South Carolina and Arkansas. They're going to bring fans. To me, that's the greatness of college football, is the passion among the fan base, and seeing a bunch of those idiot pig people with their pigs on their hats screaming "suey" during. I mean, but it makes for fun. We like to make fun of them. So come on down. But the sleepy Wake Forest, Syracuse, BC. I mean, it ruins the college atmosphere to me. So from a selfish perspective, I'd like to see that. That's culturally, everything else, I think it's there, but I think it's a small factor at the end of the day. But I think almost there's a lot of people say, let's stick it to the SEC. I get it. That's short-term thinking. That's not really the right way you want to approach this thing if you're pragmatic about it all. I mean, the SEC is the right fit, especially if it gives you the financial standing that you need to have.
Yeah. No brainer.
Tom, I just need you because I know you think that too, but I just want to say, and I don't want to speak for you, I know you're incredible at graphics and digital content. So can you have a picture of either the president or Peter Collins, maybe both, walking the Christmas tree to the curb? Can we get them?
Yeah, I like it. And you have the ornaments. You have ACC teams on the ornaments.
Yeah,
on the
just have them walking into the curb.
Yeah,
maybe a car running in the background.
Yeah, and then the car you can see approaching a gate attendant at a gated neighborhood as it drives into its new destination. Absolutely.
And then have them driving off with the deuces.
Yeah. I agree. I could do it. Yes, we can easily do that.
There it is.
And one more thing for the SEC thing, just having Jeff, you lived here much longer than me and Gene too, but having lived in Tallahassee now since 2006, it's better for the city if they can get the SEC because the travel will not just be for football. It'll be for all sports, and it'll just be so much better for the economy. And also, I think better for Florida State. It's just a natural pairing. But, I mean, those are obvious things that we all know.
It's the geographic footprint. They're already rivals in recruiting. They're already rivals in many of the biggest games we've ever played. So obviously, I think most of the fan base in terms of travel and the known commodity would want the SEC. Yes, we thumb our noses at a lot of them, and I will continue to do so. And at no point will we chant SEC upon winning the conference.
That has to be put in the contract. If they sign with the SEC, say we will not do that.
No, we will never do that, ever. If anything, we'll be the bastards of the SEC. Yes, it would be a grand title for us. We can have the shirts. I love it. I love the idea. I love tonight, too. We're going to get together. 4 subscribers, by the way. Pull that up, Tommy. We got this tonight at 7, I believe it is.
We do.
The whole crew is going to be there for a little AWA, Ask Warchant Anything, 7 o'clock tonight, exclusive, live, interactive. It's a panel Q&A for warchant.com members only. We'll all be there for various periods of time. I'm going to be there at the beginning of the meeting, but everybody is going to be there at some point. So come on in if you're a member at warchant.com and ask your questions, and let's have some fun with it tonight. And if you're not a member right now, what are you waiting on, guys? Good Lord. Can you imagine how much fun we're going to have this season with this off in the background or maybe at the forefront, depending on how you want to look at it? I have a feeling it fades to the background just a little bit once the football starts against LSU. Practice begins tomorrow. Here we go. Let's get it on. Sign up for warchant.com. Of course, like this video, thumbs up, all that. That way you get the notification when we come back on to do this. Until a couple of hours from right now, that's Gene Williams and Tom Lang. I'm Jeff Cameron. Be well, everybody. Hopefully we have some more information in 2 hours, right?